and they're like outrageous. They come in like every possible color that you can imagine, really. Like I can't think of a colorway that doesn't really exist. And I think that's probably one of the biggest draws, is that makes them really inspiring, because they create their own color palette, and then you can kind of build on that, and it's the colors that you would never think to put together in any other way, because there's literally no other flowers that kind of grow in that spectrum of colors.
Okay, India, hello.
Yeah. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very excited to be talking about irises, because you are iris expert and also iris lover.
I think it's turned into more than just like a love of irises. I think it's turned into like a full-blown obsession, like absolute obsession. I can't. It's probably I dream about them even. Like, it's not ridiculous.
I have to say, I forget every year how beautiful they are. They sort of sit there in the ground, and then at this time of year, and we're both surrounded by what we've got out. So middle of May at the moment when we're recording this, and just these are sort of my first that have really come out. And I remember how much I love them. I really wanted to record this with you and have a discussion about really how to make the most of them and why they're so special, and just to sort of get your advice and your top tips on how to grow beautiful flowers. So we could start with, like, what is it that you love about them? What makes them so special?
I mean, they're just completely over the top, and they're like outrageous. They come in like every possible color that you can imagine, really. Like, I can't think of a colorway that doesn't really exist. And I think that's probably one of the biggest draws, is that makes them really inspiring, because they create their own color palette, and then you can kind of build on that, and it's colors that you would never think to put together in any other way, because there's literally no other flowers that kind of grow in that spectrum of colors. So you can get everything from like the deepest, inkiest blue to like a perfect, almost like a green white color. Like there's every single thing in between. So like even the most beautiful browns and really beautiful colors of pink. So like every kind of pink you can imagine, and not just like solid colors either. So they can be so many different colors. So like some of the ones I've got here, I've got like standards that are lilac, and then they're sort of brown in the middle, and then falls that are like golden on the outside with like a caramel in the middle. It's just like insane. And they're like so ruffly as well. They're just like really, like, they've got so much texture to them. I think a lot of people are put off because of how large they can be. They're quite like a large flower, but to me that's one of the reasons why I love them. They're like big and bold and the focal point of an arrangement or a vase or anything. They also are a really good cut flower. Loads of people think that they're not a great cut flower, but they are, because so many of them have more than one bud on a stem. So even if your first bud goes over, you've probably got 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 buds that are then going to gradually open in your vase over the course of like a week or 2 weeks. Because as long as you kind of keep the water fresh, like any normal flowers, and deadhead any gone over flowers, they just keep opening, and that deadheading process kicks the next bud into action. It kind of like tells it that it's its turn and it's ready to go, and that's kind of what happens. I've got one here that is actually gone over, and let me get it out. So you can see it's gone, like, they go like this kind of weird sort of gooey, and they curl up into their cells, and you literally deadhead it by like snapping it off. So you've just literally snapped it, and that's deadheading. As simple as that.
And there's another bud behind it.
Yeah, so that will kind of kick that bud into sort of action to start growing. And like you can see this one here that's just starting to open as well. I deadheaded the one that was off there, and that started to open, and this one opened because I deadheaded the one off here. So this one stem had 6 buds on. So like that's amazing for like one flower, really.
Yeah. I am so embarrassed that it took me such a long time to realise that. So I thought when they just died, that was it. They sort of went over. So I've got one here. This is, I think it's frappe. I'm not totally sure. One of the bits of advice I have for everybody is label them, because they look very similar for most of the year. So this one is obviously, and actually I think this got a bit of rain damage as well, so it didn't last as well as it could have done. But like you say, there's a whole new one behind it here.
Just waiting, and by you taking that off, you're going to make that next bud kind of kick into a lot sooner, which is really exciting.
And also,
so
sorry,
they can last like easily, so this one has been out in my kitchen, so hot, warm, sunny, kind of quite south facing in the afternoon and things, to get a lot of heat in here, and it's been out for like 3-4 days now, and it still looks really good, and I reckon it's got another easily day or 2 days in it, which doesn't sound like a huge amount of time, but actually it is, when you've then got another bud underneath that's then going to open and give you the same length of time as well. So, and
the colour of that is just beautiful. What varieties have you got there? I mean,
this one here is called Just a Crush. So, and this is like a really beautiful, like dusky lilac colour, and then so the uprights are called standards. So this is the bit that's like lilac at the top here, and then these bits are called the falls. So the falls on this one are that kind of really nice golden colour around the outside. And then it's got a little yellow beard, which goes really well with it as well.
And what else have you got there? And they're different heights as well. Is that just that you've cut them different heights? Or
No, actually I've got 3 different so like types. So they're all bearded irises rather than beardless, which means they have that kind of furry little beard on the inside. But I've got, so in here, this little one here, this one's called Overcast. So this one is a standard dwarf bearded iris. So this one is probably a great one for people that maybe don't have much space, because you can get loads of beautiful colours and loads of amazing kind of variations of the standard dwarf ones, just like you can with the tall ones. So, but if you're kind of limited on space, this is like the standard dwarf ones are really lovely. You can also get mini dwarf ones, but I don't have any mini dwarf ones because they're like super tiny. They're kind of a little bit pointless as cut flowers. And then this one also is a standard dwarf bearded iris. So this one's called Purr. It's a really pretty one. You can kind of see it's got like quite a lot of veining on its falls, which is really nice. And it's got a slight kind of purpley blue tinge to its beard at the end as well. And then I have got Flying Solo, which this is Flying Solo, and this one in here is also Flying Solo. So they've got a bit of a height difference at the moment. So you can see, and these are intermediate bearded irises. So they're kind of the next one up from the standard dwarfs in size. So they're kind of not massive. Well, I mean, they're quite tall, really. Like this one is quite big, but they're nowhere near as big as what the tall bearded irises can get to. And then these ones in here, and Just a Crush is a tall bearded. So I've got this one, which isn't actually out yet, but I was too excited, so I picked it.
That is beautiful.
This one's called Muse Blue. So you can see how many buds that one's got on.
Just incredible.
Yeah, so that one I will just keep deadheading and keep cutting and cut it off if those go over before these start to open as well. And then I've got this really pretty, this is a white one. This is a really lovely one. This one's called Immortality. This one's quite an easy one to get hold of. A lot of people grow this one. And it's also a rebloomer, which means that you're likely, not 100%, but you're likely to get another flower later in the year. So like maybe late August, September time, you might get another flower spike or a couple of flower spikes. So
I mean, I have to say that is one of my, not problems with irises, but it is the thing that I grapple with a little bit, which is I love them and they are so beautiful, but I get a little bit caught up on how much space they take up, because the one thing that I know about irises and growing irises is that the rhizomes should be on the surface of the soil, and they should be baked in the sun. I get that. So then I think, gosh, does that mean I can't plant anything in between them or around them? Do they need a bed of their own? In which case that feels like a massive commitment for a flower that, although it is astonishingly beautiful, has quite a short flowering window, and also isn't cut and come again. It's a bit of a one-off bang.
Yeah, and I think that does definitely put quite a lot of people off. But I always look at the fact that it doesn't really take up any more room than, say, like a peony does. And you don't really get anything else from a peony after a few weeks in June. So I kind of think that in a way they're far more exciting than peonies. I'm very biased there, not a massive peony fan, but and they also like that similar sort. They need that similar sort of amount of space. So if you can make room for a peony in your garden, you can definitely make room for an iris in your garden. And they don't need a bed to themselves. You can plant them in the border. You just need to be like aware of where you're putting it. Like you are completely right. They don't want to be overshadowed. You don't want to grow things in between them. Believe me, I've learned that lesson. I planted a bed outside, one of my first bearded iris beds, and I was like, oh, I'll just plant some annuals in between it after they finished, and it'll be fine. And it just absolutely wasn't, because it just caused them to get the kind of fungal spot disease a lot quicker, because they were damp, because they weren't getting the heat and the light on the rhizomes and things like that. So I mean, if you're going to grow it because you want like a bed of irises and you want to use them as maybe cut flowers, or you just want to enjoy them en masse on their own and you've got space to do that, then that is 100% the best way to grow them.
Okay.
But if you want to just add them to your garden, I would just suggest putting them on the edge of your borders, just, or like on a corner, somewhere where they're not going to get completely encroached. It doesn't matter if they get a little bit overshadowed. They ideally want, you know, as many hours of sunlight in a day as you can provide them. But if they have a little bit of shade, it's not going to kill them. They just might not bulk up as much or produce as many flower stems as if they were getting baked for hours and hours a day. So I would say that you should put them in the garden. I've got there's a couple that are in our garden here at my parents' garden, and they're huge, they're amazing, and they look brilliant, and yeah, they're doing fine, and they've got plants all around them, and they stay there all year, and they're happy, and they have their own space. So they've just got, like, at the edge of the border and in the corner of the border, and they've sort of created their own little alcove as well. Like, a good way of planting them is to plant if you're going to plant a few, is plant them so the rhizomes are like facing in. So you're almost creating their shelter from everything else in the border by their leaves growing.
The other thing that a question that someone asked me is that their irises are looking amazing and they're, you know, looking really fantastic, and they've given them loads of space, but something's eating them. And actually, I just noticed that one of mine, and it's eaten away the neck, but also the petals. What do you think that is?
It's very likely slugs. Slugs absolutely love them. It's literally like their favourite snack ever. So if you have slugs in the garden, then it is likely they're going to make a beeline for your bearded irises. So I've had quite a few issues with slugs before. And for some reason they just love biting the stem off, and they like to do it like just before it's going to flower. So it's like excited for your iris flower, and then suddenly it's like lay on the floor next to it because the slug has gone for that. So yeah.
So what's happened to this one is there's sort of nibbles out of the stem here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so thick there, but you're right, it was the neck of it that it's just taken off.
They really, really love them.
Yeah, but I did cut it anyway and bring it in partly to show you, but I thought also will this bud flower? So there's a tiny colour at the top.
Definitely. So hang on. Yesterday I clumsily snapped this guy off. So he's like kind of not even close to being ready yet, but I brought him in because it's likely that he will flower inside in a vase.
Oh, wow.
So all of those ones that aren't really out yet, will definitely flower, I would say. They're pretty good for that. They keep growing.
I mean, that was one of my questions, is about sort of conditioning and the point at which you cut. And I have to say, I'd never be brave enough to cut quite that early. But my general rule of thumb with most things like roses and, you know, most things, is as soon as you can see a bit of colour, you're probably quite good.
Yeah, I would say normally with irises, you wait slightly. So I've got a little, this one. So this one, you can see there's quite a lot of colour showing. So we're probably still like 1 or 2 days off that flowering. So that's probably the point in which I would normally cut it. So this one was literally just me knocking into it, walking but yeah, so this would normally be the kind of when I would pick it if I'm going to use it for something. If I'm picking it to put it in the house, I normally pick it when it's out, just because I still know that it's going to last for a few days anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I have to say, even that, the colour on that is just beautiful. There's so much, like you said, there's so much veining and so much detail.
Yeah, and it's so fun to watch how they change. So many of them start off like a certain colour when they're in bud like that, and then as they open, it kind of gradually, as it's like unfurling, you can see how the colour's starting to change and how you're kind of noticing all these other colours as it opens up. So I've got a variety of one that when it's in bud, it looks like lime green, like really, really lime green. And then as it like slowly opens, it kind of goes to this almost like chartreusey, yellowy green colour, and then it goes like gold. So it's like, it's just every bit of that stage and experiences. And of course I'm out there literally like every 10 minutes, just like watching, like waiting. So
yeah, absolutely. So I mean, these ones are a bit different. So this is Langport Wren. Now you've described all of the different sort of types. I've suddenly these are much shorter than my usual, and I just thought they were just short, but actually these are probably, how tall's an intermediate?
Like normally between this sort of height and shorter, but that one could be a border bearded iris, because you've got miniature dwarf bearded irises, you've got standard dwarf bearded irises, you've got intermediate bearded irises, then you've got mini tall bearded irises, then you've got border bearded irises, and then you've got tall bearded irises. So the majority of what I grow are tall bearded irises, because I like how big they get, because the tall bearded irises can get anywhere between like 35 and 45 inches from rhizome to top of flower, which is just like massive, and it's like really fun.
I'm gonna
so but those, I would say, they could be a border, or they could be an intermediate, or they might be a tall, but they just might be a slightly on the shorter spectrum of a tall.
I will Google this and I will put the answer somewhere. I've got a really lovely brown one, which is carnival time, I think. I have a list of all the ones I bought, and so I know that it can't be anything except the ones on the list. So I have to spend every spring, I have to, you know, have Google open and the flower in front of me trying to match which variety is great fun. And I'm fairly sure it is carnival time, but it is the most beautiful glossy brown, which brown irises are very, very highly sought after, I happen to know. And you have one of the only true brown irises in the UK, don't you?
I do, and it's like my absolute baby, and I love it. It's such a beautiful colour, and it's kind of like, it's like one of those ones where it's really hard to describe, and when you take pictures of it, you're not really kind of getting exactly the kind of colours of it, but it's like a really deep muddy brown when it opens, and then as it fades, it almost goes to like a kind of dusty grey, like dry, earthy kind of brown. It's just beautiful, yeah. And it's called Downtown Brown, so it's also got a great name, which most of them have. Like honestly, there's some of the most ridiculous names I've ever heard for irises. Like I think that's partly half the fun, is that some of them are just like really stupidly named, and then especially when they open and you're like looking at them and you're like, honestly, how did that get that name? Like how did it afford that.
Yeah, so this one's Champagne Elegance, which sounds terribly lovely.
But it's perfect. It is like, it looks, it's got that colour, those like falls of it.
The falls,
that beautiful like champagne.
Yeah, I'm going to use all the technical language now. The falls on it, the standard's quite lilac-y. Lilac-y is not generally my colour, but the falls on it just soften it. And you're right, I would never put lilac and a sort of champagne-ish colour together, but they just work perfectly.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfectly. Yeah, it is. I mean, some of yours are just astonishing, because I love the deeper caramelly colour. I'm not sure that's quite dark enough for me. And this is Frappe, which is meant to be a very, very soft pink. But I think with the weather that we've had, it's got a bit of rain damage. So I'm not sure this is maybe quite what. If I leave these ones inside, these will probably come out a different colour.
Yeah, and it'll probably be like a slightly different colour when they start coming out inside as well. Yeah, but it's a beautiful one. Really, it goes really well with Champagne Elegance as well.
Yes.
You can tell that you've really thought about your colour palette, whereas I've just literally ordered everything that I possibly can. And so when they open, it's like almost too much. Like there's like so many clashing colours happening that it's just like a little bit intense.
Well, it's funny because I think I bought all of mine from Kelway's, which is a locals. It's in Langport in Somerset, which is why this is a very famous Kelway's Iris Langport Wren. And I probably bought them about 8 or 9 years ago now. And it was simply because they had a 50% off end of season sale. And I literally just went through all of them that I liked and had like 5, which means they're everywhere. But I never really had a sense of how to. No, that's not true. I did know what I should be doing with them. I've never committed enough space to them and stayed committed. So they did have their own iris beds. And then I thought, oh, I really need that space for something else. So I pulled them out and dotted them around. And of course, they don't really like being dotted around. So I did want to ask you about how organised I am. Hang on. So these are some that I dug up. So it would have been late summer last year. And I put them in compost. I laid them on the surface. So when we were just talking about being able to see the rhizomes earlier, I'm just going to show you. These are the rhizomes here. Oh, I'm already seeing that I have many more rhizomes in a pot than you do. Just from
so this one. So this one was one of the ones that was divided last year, so probably a similar time to you. So we did them in, I think it was late August we did them, middle to late August, and we dug all of them up and we split all of them, and then that's when I kind of sold a few. So this was one of the ones that was a potluck one because I had no idea what it was going to do, and because I'd lost the labels for basically half a bed full of them weren't labeled, so I was like, it could be anything. It literally could be anything. So this was just one single rhizome that got split off another one. So it's just in this pot. Most of my other ones are in a pot exactly like yours with like quite a lot of rhizomes in, which is kind of better because they don't want too much compost and stuff happening. But yeah, this one similarly has kind of got that going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I wouldn't normally put one in a pot, but this was just like one. It could have been anything, and I didn't want to mix it with something else.
Don't feel so cruel now. No, you did a really fantastic Instagram story the other day, which is one of the funniest things I've seen for a while, which is you were like squeezing.
Creepily going around, like going, ooh.
Yeah, that's exactly what you were doing. And which is just for those who didn't see that particular Instagram story, it was because someone asked how you tell if they're going to flower. And you said the leaves start to sort of span a bit and you can feel the flower buds. So of course, I immediately went straight out and started squeezing my irises. And actually, I can't feel anything coming through. Is this because they need another year? Do they not like the pot? Have I done something wrong?
So they don't really like being in a pot.
Right.
They're not a fan of it. So mine are just all in pots this year because I had a bit of a space issue this year, and I knew that the beds that they were all planted in, I needed to use for annuals for this year.
Yeah.
So mine all went in pots just as a temporary kind of 12 months, 18 months, just let's leave them in there and then we'll find somewhere else to put them, because there's so many of them. And they all needed dividing anyway, because they'd been in the beds between 3-4 years,
Yeah.
some of them, so they were massive. Yeah, but they don't really like being in pots. They're not a fan of it. They much prefer being in soil. So like if you've got the option to plant them in soil, in your garden, in a bed, then definitely I would say do that. I mean, you can, like, they will flower in pots. You know, some of mine are like 80%, maybe 70% of mine are going to flower in the pots. They're not going to flower particularly well. That's the only thing I would say. They're going to flower like slightly shorter. I think they'll be maybe a little bit more brittle in the stems as well. So they don't love it, and I think it is literally just because whatever compost you put them in is probably going to be slightly too rich for them.
Yeah.
You know, they like low nitrogen kind of feed, so, or no feed at all. Some people don't feed their irises at all.
Yeah.
But you are recommended by some growers to feed them a low nitrogen feed. So often the compost that you're kind of potting them up into is already going to have more nitrogen and more kind of other elements in that is probably going to be a bit strong for them.
Yeah.
They're not a fan of it. And also your pots are going to hold moisture more and they're going to dry out quicker. So they're not going to have that regular kind of moisture level that they like to have. And also often with the pots, if they're kind of a bit too crowded or they're not necessarily in the right place in the garden or something like that, then they still might not be getting enough sun.
So I mean, I did put it, I have about a sort of a 6-foot stretch of the side of the back kitchen, which is my one south facing wall, and I did put them on a little stand there. But actually, from what you've said, I'm just looking at it, there's quite a lot of moss and stuff on the top of this compost.
Yeah,
it's probably just too damp and it's too rich, and it's not draining enough for them.
There is also the fact, like this one, I'm giving it a little feel again. Very unlikely that this is going to flower this year, and that's simply because sometimes when you've split them, you've kind of split them not too much, because you can't really split it too much, but sometimes it needs an extra year or maybe even sometimes 2 years to bulk up enough in the rhizome to kind of produce that flower. And also a lot of people, I cut them back at the end of the year, so when they start to go kind of like yellow, or they start getting the kind of weird fungal spots that they get on them, and the leaves start to die, I cut them back normally to kind of like a couple of inches above the rhizome. If you do that too early, then you're stopping that extra kind of sunlight and nutrients that the leaves and things are picking up, feeding that rhizome. So if you've cut it back too early, maybe split it a little bit too much, and then maybe put it in a pot where it's getting too dry, too damp, then you're going to struggle to get any decent flowers off it in the first year for sure. So
I'm instantly going to go and plant them all out into a bed. Okay. The only other thing I really wanted to ask you, if people are wanting to see some varieties so they know what they like and to choose, where can you recommend going and seeing some or learning about them a bit more?
So there are some great, there are a couple of great nurseries in the UK that sell them. That a couple of them actually have got open days at the moment, and some of them are doing like NGS days and things like that. So if you can get to them, or you can get nearby, you can go and have a look. Alternatively, they've all got great websites that have got all their varieties on. So there's a nursery called Seagate, and they're in Lincolnshire. And they've got great irises, some really beautiful varieties. There's also Charlie's Iris Garden, which is another great one, and that's in Lewes, I think. They've got really, and I know that they've definitely got an open day or in a couple of days at some point really soon. And they've got like really nice beds full of irises, so you can go and have a look there. There's also Hurst irises. They've got some nice varieties. They've got quite a lot of dwarfs. I've bought a few dwarf varieties of them before. There's some really lovely ones. Again, you can see a lot of what they've got on their website. And then the other two people that I would recommend is Claire Austin. I know she's not open this year, but she's got lots on her website, and she's got some great varieties that you can choose from. And then there's KO, the French company. They have got great choice on their website as well. So even if you just want to have a little look and kind of get lost in like half an hour of ogling at beautiful coloured irises, I would say their website's definitely worth a look as well. And they, I think they do still ship over here, which is good, and it's not too expensive. Yeah, so those would be my kind of recommendations for if you want to add to the collection that you've got, or you want to kind of start thinking about adding some to your garden or your cut flower patch. They're a good option, and they're good quality rhizomes as well. I mean, that's really an important thing, is that when you're buying your iris, you want to get like a good rhizome. You don't want some kind of little tiny thing that's not gonna, you're gonna wait 3 years or something before you get anything from it, because let's face it, we're all gonna get a bit bored before that point, and it's probably gonna get challenging. So
yeah, so you can't plant peonies, and then someone says, oh, you can't cut them for like 5 years. It's like, what?
I'm obviously going to cut that.
I'm going to de-bud it, is what I'm going to do at just the moment that it's just about to flower.
Yeah. And I may have some available later in the year as well. So there's some that were ones that didn't get kind of put on the website for sale last year and things like that. So yeah, that might happen possibly, because there's a lot out there, and I think I probably need to cut it down a little bit. I say that as I'm like planning to order more at some point.
I have to say, just as you were talking, I thought, oh yeah, I'll just go and look at those. I'll go and look at those. Just go and look at those. And if you haven't seen India's tissue paper, it is the most iris themed thing of beauty, short of an actual iris, that I've ever seen.
Everything's becoming like incredibly iris themed. I've got like 3 different types of stickers now. I've got my tissue paper. I mean, I've got little iris shaped candle holders in the living room. There's like a big framed picture that India Hobson took of one of my irises last year. It's literally becoming a bit much.
They are a real I find them a real love or hate one. I love them obviously, but I don't know if this is a gender thing. I don't know how to make it gendered, but Sandy, my husband, he doesn't like, when you were talking about at the beginning about how big they are and how ruffly they are, he gets really twitchy around ruffly flowers. He likes a slate hellebore, or he doesn't like wisteria very much, and he makes this funny noise whenever I bring an iris into the house. I'm sort of like, ugh.
So when he gets back later, he's going to be horrified at the table scene, isn't he?
Yeah. This is my kitchen table. It's covered.
Yeah, no, Chris loves them. I mean, he doesn't really get much of a choice, because they're literally everywhere. They kind of just like surrounded by them. But yeah, he loves them, and he's excited as I am about a new one opening. And we like, in the morning, I'll like go over there with my cup of tea, and I'm like, oh, another one, yes, and like get him over as well. So yeah, I don't know, but you're definitely right. It is a love or hate. Some people just think that they're too much. They're too kind of gaudy and over the top and colourful and big, but those are all of the reasons why I love them so much. It's just there. And also they are scented. Like, people don't think about this, but they smell beautiful. Like, every single variety that I've got is scented, and they all have a slightly different. Really? Have you not sniffed one? Give it a sniff. No?
It smells slightly like very much like, you know, when you get a new packet of balloons. A bit like that. Hang on.
I mean, they are all slightly different. So the brown one that we were talking about earlier. Lovely.
That's nice.
Has a slight like fruity, chocolatey smell.
Yeah.
And then I've got one that is a really golden colour, and that one is really citrusy, like really, really citrusy. Like they all have a slightly similar smell, but there's just like notes of
I mean, no, you're right. That is lovely. That is lovely. They don't photograph very well because they're so dark, these ones, but apart from that, they are absolutely perfect.
I mean, basically, there's no reason why anybody should not like them, because they have everything going for them as well.
Well, I'm going to assume it's just because he's not been exposed to enough different varieties. So I'll go shopping. I'll spend a lot of time bringing them into the house and just leaving them lying around. And just by exposure effect, I predict time next year.
You'll find at least one that I'm sure he'll like. So yeah. I'll use that as my reason for buying lots more and filling the garden with them. Oh, India, thank you so much. I feel incredibly inspired, and I'm definitely going to dedicate a whole row to these. And I do feel a bit sheepish about, I do take more care of my peonies, but point made. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. You're welcome. It's been lovely.